Hello, and today we are going to be talking about This Present Darkness and Piercing the Darkness by Frank Peretti. So, they are a two-book series, so that's the entirety of the series. This is a Christian author, so they're Christian fiction. And the plotline of these is it starts in a small town. It doesn't specifically say where the small town's supposed to be, but the author is actually from the Puget Sound area somewhere, and most of his books are set in like the Pacific Northwest. And some of them he actually calls out being in Oregon, or some he say are like near the Canadian border. This one, not specific, but small town, set in the middle of nowhere. And these books are an allegory for the power of prayer. So they follow, it's told by a third person omniscient narrator, and it follows two angels who are in charge of protecting this town, basically, and the pastor of the church there, and the newspaper man, the chief editor of the newspaper there, and his like right hand assistant lady. And so you get little tidbits from all over these people. And the story basically is the town is under siege from evil, and it's being infiltrated. The town's being infiltrated through the college. There's this new agey group that's trying to kind of take over the college, and the town is now being under siege by the evil that's like settled down on it. So the angels can see the spiritual part of it, and the humans obviously can't, but they can feel the effects. The angels get stronger and stronger the more prayer that's happening in the town. And so that's how it's an allegory for the power of prayer. You see the direct effects on how things are going based on how the people of the town are praying. So not supposed to be doctrinally sound at all. This is just allegorical. But it's a really interesting read for just kind of thinking about things a little bit differently. These are densely written books. They have a ton of description, not just about the town or the spiritual realm or anything like that, but just on everything, down to the author is describing the office of the newspaper. It gets down to talking about how it even has like a bell above the door that rings when people come in. So you get this super vivid picture of what everything is. You can picture exactly in your mind how this looks and how it plays out and everything, because there's such vivid description in every sentence. That does make the pace a little bit slower, but these are books where you get a little tidbit of what's going on over here and a little tidbit of what's going on over here, and you're not sure how they're connected. So you have this sense of almost like a mystery. You're not totally sure what all is going on. I mean, you know that this is a battle of good versus evil over the souls of this town, basically, but you don't really understand how everything connects. You don't really understand like why this major evil corporation is trying to take over this town. Like, none of it makes sense at first. And I personally love that, because the entire time you're like I said, even though this is not a mystery at all, it plays out like a mystery, because you spend the entire time like, I don't know what's going on, but not in a, this was so complicated I couldn't follow it. It's a, we don't know yet. We'll have to wait and see. So terms I used for the pacing of this book is densely written. You've got lush, super extravagant details and description. You have multiple plot lines going on, but it's also compelling because you just don't know what's going on. It's just enough to, like, every chapter, every section is just enough to like hook you a little bit more, but you don't know what's going on, and so they're also very engrossing. The pacing is very deliberate. Like I said, these are not they're densely written books, so the pacing is, it definitely builds. It's one of those where you, like I said, you get a little bit of here, a little bit here, and then by the time everything like meets up, all kinds of stuff is going on, and at that point it's just super action packed, and so the pacing builds as you're building towards this giant apex at the end of the book. The characterization is super detailed. You really understand, not just, you get a vivid picture of not just like the characters and who they are, but because you have these angels or demons that are following people around, you get a really good insight into what their motives are, what kind of literal demons are haunting them. So you get a really good sense of the motivation that everybody has. And so you're seeing each character on two levels. You're seeing them on the physical level and seeing how they behave, and then you're seeing the spiritual level and what kind of behind the scenes motivators that they might not even realize they have. You're seeing both, so you get really great characterization, really detailed characters. They are developed over time because you're getting everything again and just in little snippets. This is told by an omniscient third person, which is great because there is so much detail given. It would be super awkward if it was told from the first person perspective to be like, I walked in and I heard the bell ringing overhead, and then I saw this on the newspaper desk, and I saw, like, it would just be really awkward. So told from the third person perspective is really a great vehicle for this lushly described world. The storyline highlights people. And it highlights, like I said, it highlights the people on two levels. So you get the physical level and their exterior of what they're doing, and you're also getting the interior, so you're getting the psychological and the spiritual motivation for everything. Again, the author's intention with this book is to be an allegory for the power of prayer and kind of give insight. Again, this is not supposed to be doctrinal, but to give some insight into kind of like the spiritual realm is real, and these things, affect us, and we can shield ourselves. So words I wrote down to describe the storyline would be inspirational. This is absolutely the story of David besting Goliath, and the underdog winning the fight. Both of these books have resolved endings. So while it is a 2-book series, they are self-encased stories. The second one definitely, it draws on some characters from the first book. So if you haven't read the first book, you might be a little bit confused because you're going to miss all that character development that's drawn on for the second book. But the stories are completely self-encased. So it is basically, the author wrote one book and it did so well, people loved it so much that he was like, all right, I can write another one. I don't actually know if that's how it played out, but that's kind of what it seems like. And they're both good. They're both worth reading. So that's not to say that the second one isn't just as good a book. I mean, it's just as well written. It's almost, I prefer the first one just a little bit more, but I mean, it's still a super engrossing story. I own both of these. Most of the things I have to show you off of the libraries app because I hardly ever buy books. I almost exclusively use the library, but I bought both of these. You can see, like, they've been read multiple times. Now, the frame and the tone. The frame is this super vivid background of this tiny little town with this tiny little church and the spiritual realm they're in. And the frame affects the tone because you get this like small town feel. It almost feels like they're on an island all by themselves. They don't have any other help to call for. They don't have anybody else that they can rely on. It's just this town and the resources in it, and like they have to handle this themselves. And you get this the tone of these books is really like foreboding and suspenseful and kind of bleak, because the whole time you're like, there's no way this is gonna get pulled off. This is impossible. It's just not gonna happen. So bleak, but not depressing. Like I said, David takes down Goliath in the end. So the audiobooks for these, I've never listened to, so I can't speak to them. What I can say is, with King County Library System, they only have the abridged version for the first book, which is This Present Darkness, the first book. They do have the unabridged version for the second book, Piercing the Darkness, but they only have the abridged version for the first one, which is why I've never even tried to read the audio or listen to the audiobooks. I did check Audible, and Audible has it, the first one unabridged. So it does exist. It just King County, Seattle Public, and Pierce County, none of them have the unabridged version of the first book. So I don't really recommend the audiobook, just because unless you have Audible and you want to buy it, you can't, at least in this area, you can't get the first one unabridged. It might be fine abridged, I don't know. I own the book, so I just was like, I'll just read it, it's fine. So that was This Present Darkness and Piercing the Darkness by Frank E. Peretti. If you enjoyed this video, give it a thumbs up. And if you'd like to see more content, make sure to subscribe before you leave. And until next time, happy reading. I wrote the storyline, so it is definitely the story of David killing Goliath. This does have a multiple. You'll notice that most of the time I'm on my tablet here showing you a download of the the second one is and have read them multiple times. Oops, there we go.